Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. You're still watching Newzworld with myself, Yoratbetse Hlophe. Now, Ebukhosini Solutions has announced the 18th annual Kwanzaa celebrations to be held on the 26th of December. Kwanzaa is a pan-African cultural celebration based on indigenous harvest festivals that have been celebrated on the continent for thousands of years. The celebrations attract hundreds of people from all walks of life and feature a ceremonial opening ritual, artistic performances, stalls where African food, literature, clothing, natural health and beauty products as well as crafts will be on display. Well, joining me in studio to discuss Kwanzaa a little bit further is Baba Buntu, the director of Ebukhosini Solutions. Baba, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, let's just begin with the history of Kwanzaa. Talk us through how Kwanzaa was actually conceptualized.
So, if we really want to go into the history, as you mentioned, it's thousands and thousands of years of this continent being an agricultural space and also reading a lot of symbolism and meaning into harvesting, into looking after what we want to get out of the soil. So Kwanzaa then became an idea that grew, especially amongst the African American community, who were at the time, and this is around the 60s, looking for what would they, as a people that have been displaced from their roots, what would they connect themselves with to kind of belong to the continental culture and being Africans. And they found that around the continent, harvest festivals were very similarly celebrated. And they chose to then use the language of Kiswahili, which has a very strong Pan-African characteristic. And Kwanzaa means the first fruits. So that kind of became the Pan-African way of celebrating harvest, both in a physical sense, but even more in a symbolic sense. It's not necessarily a directly agricultural festival, but it symbolizes harvesting, ingathering, growth, empowerment as a people.
Can you talk to us then about I believe there are 7 principles that are linked to Kwanzaa?
Yes, so there's 7 principles. So Kwanzaa is celebrated over 7 days, normally from 26th of December till the 1st of January. And each of those days have a principle. So the first principle is unity, then it is self-determination, then it's collective work and responsibility, it's cooperative economics, it's purpose, it is creativity, and it's faith. And most of them are then pronounced in the language of Kiswahili. But I think as we have celebrated this now for 18 years in South Africa, for us it has also been very important to root it in South African realities and culture and language. So we also make sure that during the celebration, it's really felt as a South African celebration.
And how do we actually celebrate each and every one of those different principles? I mean, unity, for example.
Right. So it starts with family. Unity in the family, growth in the family, collective work and responsibility, shaping our young people to also be entrepreneurially minded and also understand both the political and cultural nuances of this continent. So in the community sense, obviously, I think unity is one of the things that as African people we have struggled with for a very long time. How do we unite? How do we see ourselves as one people? And for us, it's important to both invite people from different walks of life and actually be in a room and interact as different Africans from different walks of life. But it's also important to symbolically celebrate the different characteristics we have. So for instance, when we include prayer in our ceremony, we also make sure that we have prayers done in different languages and also from different cultural backgrounds. So to kind of remind ourselves that we're one people, but we're also many different people in one.
And then talk us through some of the different symbols that go along with the principles. I mean, the 7 candles, for example, Can it be candles from any store? Is there a specific type of way that the candle is produced?
It's not so much about where the candles are produced, although I think an underlying principle of Kwanzaa is to buy from other African people and to self-produce. But the colors of the Kwanzaa candles are black and red and green. And these are colors that are pronounced very strongly throughout the festival as well. And I think this is what makes the festival very current, because it also talks about who we have become as an African people. In many ways, I mean, we go to school, we don't really know so much about history and this continent. And that's something we share across the world. So red, black and green stands for black for the people, red for the struggle, and green for the future that we are building together. And that's not necessarily something that was celebrated thousands of years ago. So that's something that has been added in as we have
As Kwanzaa has evolved, if I can put it that way,
has
right?
followed our history and who we have become as a people.
And what other symbols are there? I believe that the candle holder actually sits on a specific mat.
Yes, so there's a mat, and the mat symbolizes foundation. That in everything you do, when you start a family, when you want to start your career, when you want to do something of significance, you need to have a foundation. And then the kinara, the candle holder, stands on that mat. And then we also, in the celebration, we put fruits and vegetables as direct symbols. I mean, they symbolize very clearly the harvest,
yes,
but in a symbolic sense as well. We harvest also in the symbolic sense that we have maybe a new child in the family, maybe somebody got a degree, maybe somebody started a business. These are things that we must celebrate and really uplift for the motivation of the next generation. And for us also to, I think a very important aspect for me is, what does future look like to us? What is an African future? If we really can and will develop and create and design our future based on who we are and the history we come from, what should that look like? And I think Kwanzaa is an inspiration, especially to the younger generation. Children have a very significant role to play in Kwanzaa, and we want them to envision this new Africa that we are rebuilding and that we are bringing into existence.
How do children actually get involved? I was going to ask you that.
So children are actually at the center of Kwanzaa. So when we do the opening ceremony, we start by children having their own space where they can learn about African history and culture, but in a actually come into the main hall and they talk about the principles that I just mentioned to you. And it's really, really beautiful when you see these small children, 7, 8, 9 years old, teaching us, the community, what kind of principles we must remember and live by.
And actually reminding you how to practice them, because I mean, I think children are the perfect epitome of unity, because they see no color, they see no race, they don't see any difference in nationalities, even in languages as well.
Exactly. And I think that's what we really want Kwanzaa to be as well, an interactive way of knowing that we are one people that come from a specific history, but that we're also going into a future that we want to shape collectively. And children have to be at the forefront of that.
And Baba, I have to also ask, you mentioned that there's a connection between the agriculture, the earth, and the people that are celebrating Kwanzaa as Africans. Does it matter whether the fruits that are used during the ceremonies are fruits that I grew in my own farm, in my backyard, or can I buy them from the supermarket?
And that it is fruits and vegetables from the soil that we actually toil and work with. But I guess some people cheat a little bit, meaning that we have become urbanites, some of us, and it becomes easier to pick up fruits and vegetables from a supermarket. But obviously the whole point is, and we really accentuate this also by the closing ceremony that we have on the 1st of January, the 7th day of Kwanzaa, where we go to a black-owned farm and we eat from what the farmers produced. And we also remind ourselves, you know, we struggled with land, and land is a political issue, it's a symbolic issue, but it's also a very practical issue. So to eat and celebrate and reclaim, even symbolically, on the land is very important.
Now, when Kwanzaa was first conceptualized, it seemed to be somewhat of an alternative to Christmas. Would you say that that's still the way that it stands today?
You know what? I think it actually never was. I think it's just something that has, because it happens around the same time. And
exactly the day after Christmas is celebrated.
Yeah, exactly. So some people are a bit confused, or some people may have thought about it, oh, black people also want to have their own Christmas. It's not that. Those who want to celebrate Christmas, they are, of course, free to do that. You don't really have to choose to only celebrate one. But I think it's very relevant for us as African people to celebrate moments and legacies that are planted and rooted in this continent. Because I have many question marks to Christmas.
So do you think Africans should not be celebrating Christmas?
I think so. Because even within the Christian world, and I mean, obviously, Christian religious people would hold up Christmas as an important celebration because of their Savior. But first of all, the dates of Christmas have very little to do with the actual birth of Christ. None of the symbols and the actions that are done around Christmas can be traced back to the theology or the actual faith of Christian people. So it is a bit of a strange festival, and when you think about, it's very Eurocentrically presented. It has snow, it has reindeer.
I think Santa Claus seems to have overshadowed Jesus Christ himself, right?
Exactly.
And it's become overly commercialized as well in the past couple of years.
Very, and I think it's actually ridiculous how we then want to also talk about Christmas trees in Africa. We want to have people in the supermarkets wearing red hats. In Africa, it's clearly not. So I think there's something that is a bit off and strange about Christmas, and I think there might still be people who celebrate it mainly for a religious purpose, but it has definitely become a very commercialized. I mean, we see the shopping centers start dressing up for Christmas 3, 4, 5 months before the actual celebration.
Now, considering that we have Christians in Africa, a lot of Christians actually that make up the African continent, and other religions as well, would you say Kwanzaa is a way of bringing together all of the religions? Does it discriminate against one or the other?
It does not discriminate, and I think the whole point of Kwanzaa is to remind ourselves that we need to work as a collective force. We have a number of challenges on this continent, and yes, we have differences too, and we might see certain issues a little bit in a different way, but we also have a lot that we can unite around. We have a lot of aspirations for our future and for the troublesome realities on this continent, the oppression of our people. And when we can stand united across that, I don't mind if I sit next to or work with somebody who may worship differently than me or might position their political agenda a little bit different than me. So we need to come to a place, and I feel, yes, Kwanzaa is first and foremost a celebration. It's not necessarily a political rally, but at the same time, and I like to always use this symbolism to say that I feel that Kwanzaa gives me a sneak peek into a future Africa that I'm very passionate of seeing. Because when you walk around in our neighborhoods and our townships and our cities, sometimes it's depressing because you see so much of what we don't want to continue to exist. And at Kwanzaa, you get to experience people from very different parts of African society being in deep conversation, enjoying each other's company, presenting trade, presenting crafts, presenting things that they've made, sing songs together, use the languages of Africa, seeing children and adults in harmony. And that's an important vision for us as African people because we haven't been free for a while. So to get a small taste of it kind of pushes you even more to work harder.
Well, Baba Buntu, thank you very much for joining me. I think we'll leave it there for this evening. That was Baba Buntu, the director of Ebukhosini Solutions, just talking to us there about Kwanzaa, the meaning of Kwanzaa, its history and its relevance to the African people. It is time now for a short break. Don't go anywhere. We've got more news coming up on the other side.